Thank you all for braving the rain to come. Some of you have been our guests earlier. For those of you who haven't, this is the event where we focus on the explanatory aspect of our journalism, the deeper, more thoughtful bits that sometimes get left out of the daily news reports, but an understanding of which is critical to a richer, fuller, more nuanced appreciation of complex situations. In our newspaper, this project takes the form of a daily page called Explained. And on our website and social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter, you can find all that appears in the paper and much more. Today's event is about perhaps the three most important words in the news cycle these days: farmers, unemployment, elections. You hear them and read about them every day, and you will hear more about them and the interconnections between them over the next 3 months. To explain these interconnections, we have with us today an extraordinary expert whose work straddles precisely these areas. Scholar, psephologist, social scientist, commentator, and a man who has in the last couple of years probably met more farmers from across India and studied India's agrarian crisis better than anyone else. Yogendra Yadav, National President, Swaraj India, welcome. We are honored to have you. Speaking with Yogendra for the next 45 minutes or so will be my colleagues Ravish Tiwari, Chief of the Indian Express National Bureau, and Harish Damodaran, the Indian Express Rural Affairs Editor. Ravish will start with a short presentation laying out the background of the discussion. Afterward, the floor will be open for questions and the audience. Thank you. Welcome once again.
So I start the question after that, right? गिफ्ट देना है वो आपको देना है. Sorry.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'll be just making a very small, brief presentation about the background in which we all will be speaking here. Mostly we'll be talking about people, motivations, and how things get organized in the field. But I'll just throw up a few data points which underpins what we all will be talking here today this evening. So I'll be just I'll just lay the background on the issue of farmers and where they are situated in the universal matrix of Indian economy. And I'll just throw brief charts on you so that you'll keep it at the back of your mind when we'll be discussing those points here. The things in which I have framed is the structure of Indian economy where the agrarian and job issue is negotiated on the ground. So it's about the Indian economy's structure, how that plays out, the equations on the ground, and then how the changing demography of Indian society is also playing mischief with the structure and the equations. So this is the first chart which I have is about, I'm just showing you how the Indian economy has grown over the years, and I'm using 2004 and 5 constant price for the GDP indicator. So I'm using data only till 2011-12 because the back series is still not out yet. But if you look at the Indian economy has grown over the years since 1951. And the yellow part is the services industry in the saffron or red, and the blue is agriculture. So you can see that every part is growing up. Very quiet, it will look like services have grown massively. What has changed, if you look at the percentage of Indian economy every year, you will find that agriculture has slid. So from more than 50% in 51, it has gone down below 15% now. So this is the slide. So everybody says that India is a rural country, it's an agrarian country, but just look at what has happened to the macro structure of Indian economy. So now, majority of India, we call it rural, agricultural, but it's only 15% people. So 15% of the GDP, it's contributing. So that's the one structural change over last 6-7 decades which Indian economy has witnessed. Manufacturing, it has increased a bit, but not massively. The area which has gained maximum is services. So this is the one big macroeconomic structural change which has happened in India, where the current situation is we are in today. The next is, now I look at how in the equations, after the macroeconomic picture, how this situation plays out on the ground. So on our left is the number of households. So depending on the kind of land holdings you have, if you look at this blue is marginal farmer which has less than 1 hectare of land. You see that this number has grown, increased from 1970s to last survey that data we have, it has grown massively in numbers over the years. So in last 4 decades, number of people who are marginal farmers, that's less than 1 hectare of land, has grown up massively. This is happening. So basically, when the population is growing, land holdings are fragmenting, and this is what's happening. Now, so the largest share of farmers is marginal farmers holding less than 1 hectare. But if you look at their share in the total land holding, that's from where you will produce, their share is this blue. It's just minimal. So there are such a huge number of households owning up only this much of land. So this is what on the ground what has happened. A lot many people, lot many households, but very little productive assets in the capital in form of land to produce economic surplus for themselves. Now, the web is how we look at then how they are operating a farm. So they're earning from those farms, and they are also spending from those earnings. So if you look at the structure, how they're earning, if you look at, this is the lowest bottom of the farmers at on the chart on the right, is every bit in the red is what they are expenditure. I'm sorry, there's one of the blips is missing. I think the blue is the earnings and the red is the expenditure. So you can say that every small farmer, 1, 2, 3, these 3 bottom percentiles, farmers are earning less than their expenditures on a monthly basis. And what is the proportion of those farmers? This is the bottom 3. So the bulk of farmers, this yellow, red, and this blue, these are the bulk of farmers. They are spending more, so they have more expenses than the earnings that they are deriving from their farms. So this is the structure. Bulk of our farmers are producing or earning less from their land than their expenditures. Now, the shift what has happened over the years is demography. Younger population and people want to move out. As you saw, the bulk of population is not able to generate income proportionate to their expenditures, monthly expenditures. Obviously, they are looking for jobs outside farming. And if you look at what has happened, this is the agricultural, in the proportion of population in the workforce. If you look at this is the blue line is the agricultural workers. So they could be either the farmers themselves, the cultivators, or the agricultural laborers. So it has continuously growing just because it matches with the population growth. So there is nothing unusual about it. But if you look at this, is the yellow line is people, those who are working outside the farm. So they are neither agricultural labor nor they are the cultivators. And this number is rising rapidly after 91. So if you look at the year 91, it has increased rapidly as compared to the population. So that means a large number of people have started quitting farm-related activities. If you break down this blue line into two separate categories, among those who are farmers, those who cultivate or till their lands, and those who are agricultural laborers. This is here in this right chart, and you see that the actual farmers have started plateauing or a bit of deceleration over decades, and this this red line, this saffron line, this is agricultural labor. So this agriculture, these are people, those who don't have big enough land holding to be a cultivator to sustain their families. So these farmers, if you look at between 2001 and 2011, they have surpassed the farmers. So between 2000 and 2011, the number of agricultural laborers cumulatively across the country have surpassed the number of farmers, those who are cultivating. Likewise, if you look at the people, those who are working in outside agriculture, these numbers crossed between 91 and 2001 census, these numbers surpassed the agricultural farmers, the cultivators. So these are the changes in economy on the ground has happened. Now this is how it is playing out. That the structure of India's economy has changed. The agriculture is producing much less than what it used to produce. It still sustains a large number of farm holdings and households, but it's not as remunerative, they are not earning enough. And now comes the power tussle. Then how do you balance? And one of in the policy circles that we talk about, the producer is our farmer. So what is happening is our farmers are producing and they want a price for their produce. And that is one issue which is agitating the minds of everybody, whether we are keeping our farmers happy or not. So everybody's focus is there. But another segment is the consumer. So let's say if there are sugar prices are high or onion prices are high, everybody starts crying foul that, oh my God, there's such a huge inflation. And then government steps into and it cracks down on trade, so interferes in the agricultural markets and brings down the price. That's for consumer. Now, which interest to prioritize is where the balance, the entire trick of the entire game of policy making is, and there is a trade-off. How do you play out? So, if farmers are not getting prices, they are agitating against you, they can go against you. If you consumers are, so you allow them to get good prices. The moment you start prices to go up to help the producer, that's the farmer, then the inflation or prices goes up, then consumer starts crying foul. Then you start taking out measures to bring down the prices, then that affects. So it's a seesaw balance. How do you balance? There is a trade-off, and this is what the entire debate, this is how in abstract term, this is how the debate is poised. Whom do you prioritize? Is the discussion we'll be carrying forward, and how it plays out in elections, in job markets, across demographies, across different segments of economy. And I think I'll invite Harish to begin from here. Yeah. We'll start the discussion from here.
Thanks, Ravish, for setting the context. So Yogendra, we'll start off by, would you say that agrarian distress is to the Modi government what corruption was to UPA? You think this has been this is a sort of a hot button political issue. I mean, will this prove to be whatever the nemesis for this government, just like corruption was, whatever Commonwealth Games and those kind of things?
Can I begin by saying something slightly different, Harish, which is this is for everyone's benefit. I think the idea that this is an expert and this is someone asking him is completely bogus, because I've learned more from his writings than you may have learned from anything. And I must say, because Raj is also sitting here, your rural page is the one page which has informed this country more than I think the whole of media, the rest of the media put together, on questions of agriculture, on rural and farm. one thing I read regularly, and when I wrote that little book, this is not to advertise the book, but I've just wrote something on what Mr. Modi's record on agriculture has been. And the one thing that I drew most upon was his writings. So you have to answer half the questions that you asked me. And now to come back to whether this is going to be the nemesis for Mr. Modi, and is this the real issue today? I really think there are two issues currently. Let me put my prejudices on the table so that no one is misguided. Because I don't want to pretend to be some neutral agriculture expert, which I'm not. So just to put my prejudices on the table so that we can have a clear discussion. I'm one of those in the country who believe Mr. Modi must go for this country to have a sane future. And I do believe he is going to lose. But this is not what we are discussing right now. I think there are two real issues. To my mind, the reason why the current regime is in a political crisis right now and would face electoral Waterloo is not what I would like it to be, namely democracy and secularism. Those are not the issues on which this government is on the back foot. It is on the back foot on economy. And principally two issues: farmers, unemployment. They're playing out somewhat differently, and maybe we should explore why they are playing out slightly differently. Not because one is a big crisis, the other is not. But at the moment, they're playing out slightly differently. On farming, I think it's fair to say that there is a very deep anger. Now, do remember, BJP has never been the preferred party of the Indian farmers, by and large. 2014 was an exception. Lot of farmers, say in states like Haryana, Western UP, many of them voted the BJP for the first time in their life. There was a sense of positivity, there was a sense of hope, there was a sense that some development growth, etc., was going to take place. And thereafter, it's been a series of disappointments, triggered by many things. But today, the situation in which we have reached, to my mind, an ordinary farmer has by now made up his or her mind that this is not my kind of a party. In Haryana, they would not speak, they would speak in caste terms. ये उन लोगों की पार्टी है, ये हमारी पार्टी नहीं है. But that, I think, in a sense, that point of no return as far as farmers are concerned has been reached. This is not so much the case probably on unemployment issue, which may be a bigger crisis than farmers, but at the moment the farmer crisis has become politically something from which it is very hard for this regime to come out. And to my mind, the results that we saw in these three states, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, that was a very partial reflection of that crisis. I honestly thought that in Rajasthan, Congress should have won 150, 160 seats. They won barely 100. But that's because, so the real problem right now is that there is anger, there is resentment, but there isn't a good agency that can channelize it, that can provide an alternative. If that were to be the case, or if it appears to be the case, then one can expect a very strong rural wave almost against the BJP in the coming election. So as of now, we can't be sure, but that's a possibility.
Yogendra, can you tell the previous example when farmers' issues determine the electoral outcome before these three elections, these three Hindi heart lists? Can you visualize, give us examples where farmer issues have formed or broken governments in elections, not midterm?
And can I add to that? The point which Ravish showed earlier in the charts, where, the farmer family's income is diversified, the so-called farmer income, farmer family income, probably maybe 50% is from farming, okay? And plus the share of farmers is coming down. Okay, so why should it have an impact in this election when we probably don't have any election earlier where farmers' issue was we don't know of any government which was brought down, because of farmers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting question. The last time farmers' agenda was on the national center stage, I think one would go back to 1988. That's the famous Ticket rally. That's the time when Nanjunda Sami in Karnataka and Sharad Joshi in Maharashtra, they're carrying these big agitations. So that's the last time farmers' issues are on the national center stage. When was the last general election in which farmers' issue was the prime issue? None. In the last 15 general elections, I can't think of one parliamentary election in this country where rural agrarian farmers' issues were at the center stage. So yes, this may be the only one. I can think of some state elections where that may have played a role. For example, Chaudhry Devilal in 1987 had offered farm loan waivers, which swept him to power. So you can think of a few exceptions at the state level. But nationally, no, really. And this, in a sense, is the most exciting thing. That it's after a long time that you may be looking at a general election where, for a change, real issues may be foregrounded. Issues of farmers, issues of unemployment, that may come to the fore. So that's a real big change. Why should it happen now, not earlier? That, Harish, is the supply side of politics and the demand side of politics don't match. The idea that you have the biggest rebellion at a place where at the biggest pain point is simply not true. If you look at, there are two or three misconceptions here. A lot of us tend to measure farmers' distress by suicide figures. Let's be clear about one thing. Suicide figures do not reflect farmers' pain point, at least in the specifics. Which are the worst affected areas of Indian farming? Bundelkhand, a part of Rayalaseema, Anantapur, etc., part of Marathwada, some parts of Gujarat and Rajasthan. These are some of the worst areas, and of course parts of Bihar and Sindh. These are places which see some of the lowest suicide rates. So suicide and farmers' distress has very little one-to-one relationship. Similarly, times of farmers' distress and time and occasion for farmers' movements, again, are not directly related. I think what happened during Mr. Modi's regime were two things. One, a combination of two droughts. The first 2 years of Mr. Modi's regime were drought years, followed by global fall in prices and domestic fall in prices. So in a sense, what happened to farmers is this. I had 2 bad years. I blame Bhagwan. This drought, no rains, all right, how do I blame the government? Indian farmers have not learned to blame the government for droughts as yet. ऊपर देखते हैं भगवान ने कर दिया, चलो मेरी किस्मत आगे. Then third year, I have a bumper crop. I produce well, I take it to the market, and then I find that prices have crashed. That is the time when the patience sort of wore thin. And this is also the moment when a significant coming together of farmers' movements took place. And I think that's the important thing. It's not only that you have this problem which gets aggravated. As you know, problem must have aggravated at many points in time. It so happened that the 10 years before this government came were slightly better years for Indian agriculture. Harish has documented it, written about it. And just 1 year before the NDA government came to power, Indian agriculture had started slipping. So it is true that this period was a bad period, but Indian agriculture has seen similar bad patches, which have not resulted in any major movement. So the fact that farmers' movements could come together, the coming together of AIKSCC, All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee. I'm a part of it, so I'm prejudiced, so please take whatever I say with a pinch of salt. But this coming together of an all India organization with more than 200 organizations on that platform this was one of the rare opportunities for farmers from Tamil Nadu and farmers from Himachal and Gujarat and Assam to come together. Even in the heydays of
Very localized, yeah.
Tiket, Joshi and Nanjuna Swami, I mean, these are three big leaders of Indian farmers in the 1980s. All three of them did not sit on the same stage. In fact, there were very murky stories about what their relationships were and how difficult it was for them to come together. So it became a rare moment where all kinds of Indian farmers came together. Number two, they did something smart, which is to say we did something smart, which is instead of giving a 40-point agenda to the government, the movement focused on just 2 points. This can be communicated. You know, if you go with a 40-point agenda, no one listens to you. And when you negotiate with the government, they pick the 7 most useless things and say, humne inki maang maan li hai. You're left with nothing to say after that. So the movement focused on just 2 demands. 1, remunerative prices. 2, freedom from indebtedness. Because these were, you know, and the difficulty about agriculture, as you know, is there's just so much diversity in Indian agriculture. The coffee plantation worker in Tamil Nadu and Kerala and the rice cultivator of Punjab and Haryana, they could be living in 2 different countries or maybe 2 different continents. The potato grower of Uttar Pradesh and the sugarcane farmer of Uttar Pradesh, they could be living in 2 different states altogether. So there's so much diversity. What this movement did was to find some common thread and could articulate. So I think this bit of organizational effort plus a structural crisis created a situation, and of course a rather indifferent handling by the government. You know, do remember, whatever Mr. Modi might say today and for the last few months, because now he doesn't give any speech without mentioning farmers. But the fact is that for the first 3 years, farmers did not exist on his mind space at all. And that's what gave farmers a certain sense that they were excluded.
Yogendra, see, you were part of the Anna movement, okay, anti-corruption movement, and you are part of this, farmers movement. What is the difference between the two? See, the Anna movement, ultimately the political gains accrued to the BJP. And today, I don't know, I think he had a fast recently. I don't think anybody went to meet him. So here, I mean, who do you think will, so is it the same thing now, you know, you have created those, whatever your All India Kisan Sangharsh Samiti has created that kind of a, a sort of a mood kind of a thing. And now that will be harvested by the political parties, maybe this time, I don't know, Congress, some alliance. So what is the difference between the two? That one was seemed to have been a more middle class issue, whereas this one seems to be, I don't know, what is the difference between the two?
Yeah. That's you brought in a similarity, which I would say is a similarity across the world, all over the world. You know, movements happen. And only an organized political party which is in a position to displace the ruling party takes an advantage. That happens all over the world. You know, if you look at 1970s, the students' movement in Bihar, Gujarat, I mean, look at any movement. This has generally been the trend. But in terms of differences, yes, the anti-corruption movement being a middle-class movement, and middle class in our country is a bit of a misnomer. It's in the middle of nowhere class. Because in our country, it's the 95th percentile and above who like to call themselves middle class. I've quite never understood what is middle about it. Because, I mean, you know, you would say someone who's on 50 percentile, 60 percentile, 70 percentile can call themselves middle. But my own sense is that nowhere in the world does the ruling class call itself ruling class. Ruling class has always nice euphemisms for itself. So in Bengal, you would say Bhadro Lok. We are the genteel, sort of various things. So Indian ruling class likes to call itself middle class for whatever reason.
Sorry.
So the fact that anti-corruption movement was was a middle class movement, brought in media attention of a scale and of a quality which is unprecedented. You know, but for, I mean, if you, I can tell you for last 4 years, I and many of my friends have done nothing except travel in rural areas, do one yatra after another yatra after another yatra. I'll give you one instance from 2015-16. This was a drought year. We were doing our yatras. I did one yatra in the month of October 2015 from Karnataka, northern Karnataka, to southern Haryana. We did a 4,700 kilometer yatra, wrote series of letters, everything. Nowhere is there any media coverage. If Harish Damodaran wants to publish articles, it is because he wants to keep track of Indian agriculture in general. But no, media has zero interest in this. Then situation in Marathwada and Bundelkhand was critical. So we did a Padyatra in Marathwada and Bundelkhand. Every day calling journalists to say, you know, and the simple thing we used to say is, boss, hame cover mat karo, yahan jo situation hai isko cover karo. So much so that I called up some of these right-wingers to say, yaar, gaay mar rahi hai, tum gaay ko to cover kar do. Chalo, insanon ki koi baat nahi hai, gaay mar rahi hai, dekho. No coverage. And then an extraordinary thing happened. What was that? A one-day international match was cancelled. Remember that? In Mumbai, a one-day international match was cancelled. No, it was not international, it was IPL match. An IPL match was cancelled. And that evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Mr. Yadav, there's a drought. What are your opinions on drought? This is the 10th month of the drought. We've been carrying yatras after yatras. We've been calling you up. We've been speaking to everyone. The drought didn't exist till it disrupted Indian deity, cricket, IPL. You know. So this was the situation. It's only in the last 1 year that suddenly the tide has turned and the distress of Indian farmer has become noticeable or noteworthy. So that was one very, very big difference. And the other thing, but from that we learned a lesson. If you remember, farmers' movements of the 1980s used to be very anti-city. So farmers would come, this is 1980s, Mr. Tikait would bring his millions to Delhi. ये दिल्ली वाले अपने आप को क्या समझते हैं? हम करेंगे. And you know, the city is disrupted, no one could care less. और सब कुछ कर करा के आराम से 7 दिन अपना करके वो जाएंगे. And the basic idea was India versus Bharat. You know, we've come from Bharat, this is India, इनको हम सिखा देंगे. Farmers' movements have learned a lesson. If you see the Mumbai March, Mumbai March was in a sense the turning point. These were largely Adivasi farmers, and they decided that no, we don't want to leave people in the city, you know, disturbed, disrupted, and basically shouting at us. No, we don't want that. We want to make friends, which is what turned the media tide for the first time. And in our march, the 2 marches that we did, the last march, which was 30th of November, we distributed actually a leaflet, which was picked up by FM radio. The leaflet simply said, माफ कीजिए, हमारे मार्च से आपको तकलीफ हुई होगी, आपको तकलीफ देना हमारा इरादा नहीं है. This is what's happening to us. This is, and you know, if we can in any way help you not be disrupted by our march, we'll be happy to do so. So I think farmers' movements have also learned some of those techniques, but in terms of media attention and coverage, there is still a world of difference. And why do I talk about media? Because honestly, governments and policy makers care only if media pays attention. Otherwise, they just do not care. Something which is not covered by the media does not exist in the mind of policy makers and decision makers. So that's the difference.
Yogen, let's disaggregate how this agrarian issue is channelized into politics. And let's take the most latest revealed preferences of voters in, I'll take, with no offense to state of Mizoram, but take the 4 states. How do you think why did BJP lose in Rajasthan? Was it agriculture or was it Vasundhara Raje? Why did Raman Singh lose so badly? He has one of the best functioning paddy procurement system, the best functioning PDS system. Why did he lose? Was it because of Raman Singh or because of agriculture? Why did the biggest sufferers of global commodity price burst is farmers of Madhya Pradesh? And Madhya Pradesh was a seesaw. I mean, it was just neck to neck. And the global commodity prices hit everybody. In Telangana, the promise of loan waiver didn't go anywhere. So if you took at one promise or one argument, how does it play out in four? It does not hold true across all these 4 states.
Absolutely.
And all 4 are major agricultural states.
Absolutely. I think it's a very fair point. Initially, after the election results, the buzz was BJP has lost because of farmers' anger. I obviously do not want to bust that buzz, which is all right. You know, if they realize it late, who am I to stop them from saying so? They should have been talking about it 2 years ago. So if they're talking about it, I obviously don't want to stop them from doing so. But the situation is more nuanced. If you were to say of the 3 states, because they're very similar states in many ways, where was the farmers' crisis worst? I would have said Rajasthan, then Madhya Pradesh, then Chhattisgarh. But there were 2 other things playing some role there. Second is general acceptance of the government, you know, anti-incumbency as is the word. Anti-incumbency again was highest in Rajasthan, then in Madhya Pradesh, then in Chhattisgarh, or so I thought. The third thing which was playing a role is availability of alternative and its viability. Now, one thing that's happening in Chhattisgarh that we did not notice, 2 things. One is Raman Singh, whose government had established some reputation for itself for doing better PDS than other states, giving cheap rice than other states, and had also initially set up a better procurement system. But one thing that we forgot is that 5 years ago, Raman Singh had made a very big promise, and he reneged on that promise. The promise was that I would buy your paddy. That year, he said 2,100 rupees.
Yeah, something like that.
Something that he promised. And after
270
election,
rupees a quintal bonus, 270 rupees a quintal bonus.
yeah, he
Yes.
promised a bonus. He went back on this. Now, 2 things were happening in Chhattisgarh. Number one, Congress as a party was on the ground in Chhattisgarh. They were leading agitations, protests, and so on, which is quite out of character for Congress party. You know, Congress generally waits for the bus to arrive after 5 years, and you know, कोई और धक्का दे के मेरे को बस में बैठा देगा. That's the usual Congress style. But in Chhattisgarh, for a change, the party was actually leading agitations. And second, in Chhattisgarh, the Congress party had made a specific promise about purchasing paddy for 2,500 rupees. And this promise was believed. Farmers actually withheld their paddy for the elections and said, uske baad jaake bechenge. And they actually got it. They got 2,500 rupees. So that was the critical thing in Chhattisgarh, which made it different from others. To my mind, the extent of BJP's defeat did not reflect the extent of farmers' anger. And the principal factor for that difference, the deficit, the gap, is the Congress party and its inability to propose anything, because in Rajasthan, what was Congress being seen as doing? Basically fighting with each other. You know, this is the general impression people had. Congress was investing a lot. The Congress was investing less in defeating the BJP and more in defeating each other. So those are the things which played out, and therefore the extent of farmers' anger was not reflected. In the case of Telangana, you're right, the distress was there as well. But the government was seen to be addressing that through that Raitu Bandhu scheme. There are lots of faults in that scheme. It's not as good as it is made out to be. But here was a government which was seen to be doing something for the farmers, which is what Raman Singh's reputation was initially, which is what Shivraj Singh's reputation was in the first two regimes. He was seen to be someone who was responding to farmers, which is a reputation Vasundhara Raje Scindia never acquired at any stage. To my mind, the political factors of how good the opposition is and how much of a credible alternative it is seen to be offering played out a very significant role and did not allow that anger to be translated into votes.
So obviously, other factors also negotiated this, the electoral outcomes the way it did. So how do you think that in other states with large Lok Sabha seats will play out? Will agriculture dominate the discourse or other political factors will dictate the political outcome?
When we say agriculture, actually, I think the word rural distress probably captures it better, because there is an agrarian distress and there is a non-agrarian distress as well. I mean, the rest of rural India also suffers very serious difficulty right now. So I think it's fair to say that there is a rural distress, and that this would be one of the reasons, obviously not the reason. And when we look at the Lok Sabha election, the simple fact is that Lok Sabha, we don't have one election in the country. You could say there are 29 elections. That's
But
not quite
2014 was definitely one election.
Yeah, 2014, for a change, was one election, and that's an extraordinary thing. As you know, after nearly 30 years that we had an election which became a national election. The whole country was voting as one, in a sense, barring a few exceptions. Because in the 90s, the principal change that came about was that states became the principal arena of electoral choice. So in the 80s, you voted for a chief minister as if you were choosing a prime minister. In the 90s, you started voting for a prime minister as if you were choosing a chief minister. That's the principal change that comes about. That continues in the first decade of 21st century as well. 2014 was different. The country voted as if they were all choosing a prime minister. And I think one change that has happened, which we can be reasonably sure of without getting into forecasting, is that we are back to the standard model of 1996, 98, 99, 2004, 2009, which is state as the principal arena. The principal choices will be made at the state level, and the moment that happens, we have a fractured verdict. So the issue of the rural will play out in different ways in different state arena. In Tamil Nadu, clearly rural distress is not the principal thing. There is a joke of a government going on in Tamil Nadu right now, and obviously people will respond to that first of all. Above all, that's the issue. In Andhra, in Telangana, in Kerala has such a different polity altogether that you expect that some national issues going out to play out in Kerala. That's not the case. So to my mind, the only arena where we should focus, which is going to be the real area, the real happening place in this election, is the Hindi belt. Happening place not because I don't believe in all those things of Hindi belt determining country's future and so on and so forth. All that is a bit of nonsense. But in this particular election, because BJP's principal success came almost entirely from this belt from Bihar to Rajasthan, include Himachal and Haryana in that, has 226 seats. And to my mind, the coming election will be decided in these 226 seats. BJP won 192 out of these 226. With allies, they control 203 out of these 226. This is where rural distress can become a factor which may cut across states in a mild way, not as the only factor, But to my mind, both, rural distress, which has a component of farmers' distress, has a component of unemployment. That's something that we need to focus more and more on. These two could hurt the BJP very severely, and although there would be a state-wise distinctions, clearly Uttar Pradesh, the SP-BSP alliance would be the real way of aggregating it. In other places, only in 3 states do we have Congress-BJP conflict. But to my mind, this would be an underlying factor which would work systematically to BJP's disadvantage in this entire belt. And that could be very costly, because BJP needs to retain a performance which was fantastic. And my broad sense is that all BJP's gains and losses outside the Hindi belt would cancel each other out. BJP would gain a bit in Odisha and Bengal and would lose a bit in Gujarat, Maharashtra and Karnataka. That would sort of more or less cancel each other out. So the real action is in these 226. And that's where the economy would really play a role. And that's, I don't think BJP has quite a response or a strategy, or they can have a strategy at this stage to respond to that.
I think you referred earlier to Congress, like waiting for the bus to come and, that kind of a thing. See, BJP is definitely a far more efficient converter or harnesser of disquiet, right? I mean, the Anna movement and all, and they managed to convert that into votes, build a brand, and around. Whereas here you don't have any brand or anything, so the issues will be there. And from all, at least my reporter friends tell me that Modi continues to be quite popular. I mean, I don't know, but I'm told he's still very popular. So when you're saying that this will not be a national election, it will be whatever, disaggregated, it will be more like 2004 kind of a thing. It doesn't seem very convincing, isn't it?
On the first thing, you could say that again. Just imagine Congress having done to farmers what Mr. Modi has done to farmers in the last 5 years. And Mr. Modi in opposition, he would have hung them upside down by now. सचमुच भाग जाते, कुर्सी छोड़ के भाग जाते लोग अगर मोदी opposition में होते. So of course you're absolutely right. I mean, it's Congress's inability to play opposition. I mean, for the last 4 years, you've had farmers' agitation. Show me one place, I mean, Chhattisgarh has a minor exception to that, but show me one place where Congress led a farmers' agitation. No way. Show me where do you have any attempt to mobilize this very, widespread disquiet of the youth? No way. So yes, that's certainly the case. I'm not sure if Mr. Modi's popularity can be seen to be a factor which would play a decisive role in the election. I do not dispute the fact that all opinion polls, even today, show Mr. Modi significantly above Rahul Gandhi. And is that surprising? I don't find that very surprising. But do remember that in 2004, since you mentioned that, in 2004, Atal Bihari Vajpayee's ratings were substantially above that of Sonia Gandhi or any Congress leader. And this was captured not only in pre-election polls, in exit poll and in the post polls. Also, they found Mr. Vajpayee's ratings were substantially higher. To my mind, what matters is not merely whether the Prime Minister is more popular or less popular. The real question is, what sort of weight do you put on the personality factor? The BJP's strategy would be that this becomes Modi versus Rahul election. And if it does, no wonder. I mean, no prizes for guessing who wins. Increasingly, this election is moving away from that. And that is the real problem that Mr. Modi faces. We have seen two things. Number one, I mean, if you look at the India Today tracker, which is a very useful tracker, every 6 months they more or less take the same sample and do a systematic tracking. So if you look at the latest India Today poll, the Rahul Gandhi Modi gap which was once, I think, 40 percentage points or so, has come down to 11 percentage point. So the gap is reducing. More importantly, the weight people assign to this factor, to my mind, is much less than before. So this won't be a Modi versus Rahul election. 2014, Mr. Modi succeeded in making this into a presidential poll. My own sense is that this is not going to be a presidential poll. So at the end of the poll, Mr. Modi, in all probability, will have a popularity ranking higher than Rahul. And yet, he's likely to lose.
So, coming to this is against, in a promise, I'm against this. But is there some promise which appeals to people? And who is the most credible promiser in the current scheme of opposition game?
I don't find any. Mamata Banerjee promises democracy to me. I'm aghast. Because I know what she did in Panchayat elections in Bengal. I mean, when Mamata Banerjee says democracy is in danger, let's come together, I don't know whether I should run towards her or run away from her. So Sharad Pawar and Mayawati and Lalu Prasad Yadav's sons come together and promise corruption-free India to me. I don't know what to do with something of that kind. So that's happening. As for the Congress party, what is the agenda? I mean, so the moment you speak to, you want to relate to, understand from any of these Mahagathbandhan. So the problem with Mahagathbandhan is the following. A, you don't know who's there. Every morning the definition keeps changing. Two, you don't know what do they stand for. What is the agenda? So far, I mean, I would have said so far we've seen, I mean, if you speak to them, the only thing they talk about, honestly, on air and off air, is iska aur iska mil jayega, itna number ho jayega, itni seat to pakki samjho. So electoral calculus is the only thing they are doing. This is not meant to be a moral criticism. This is strategic blunder. You do not win elections simply by calculus. You win elections by creating hope. Mr. Modi famously, falsely created a hope. Proved to be a hoax, proved to be anything, but there was a sense of hope in 2014. The trouble with Mahagathbandhan is they do not give me any policy. I do not know, and I cannot see any roadmap, and I do not see any personality. So that's the problem. And increasingly, and the reason why, I mean, if at all at the end of it we find that Mr. Modi is not wiped out, the credit must go to Mahagathbandhan. I think because if, as we said, if Mahagathbandhan could play a credible opposition, if they could create a sense of hope, alternative hope, BJP could go down to 100 seats in this election. But they won't, because of what the Mahagathbandhan is doing. The only declaration that we have had so far is this thing about minimum income guarantee. That's the first serious thought that has entered this election. Otherwise, we've seen it. I mean, I almost think there is a mutual conspiracy to ensure that elections happen without a single serious issue being discussed. Minimum income guarantee is the first somewhat serious idea which has come, which needs to be debated. But we don't as yet know if the Mahagathbandhan is committed to that. It's just one declaration made by Rahul Gandhi.
Do you think UPA won 2004 because of job guarantee scheme? 2004, the first election. Before
Did they promise it? Did they promise job guarantee?
It was part of their manifesto. Manrega was promised in the Congress manifesto. Congress itself did not believe in it, and they did not publicize it.
Wait. So I'm asking this question because do these specific promises sway voters?
About 2004, I think it's only fair to say that Congress did not win because of Manrega. I was a supporter of Manrega, continue to be a supporter, but it would be analytically wrong to say Congress won because of Manrega. The fact is that they included that in their manifesto. They did not even publicize it.
Yes,
They did not even go to the voters saying we would do this. So where is the question of their winning on that count? It was a very hard election to interpret. To my mind, what had happened was that election came back to normal. I wrote an essay where I called it an elusive mandate, where the fact that elections came back to state specificity, B, that bit of India Shining campaign boomeranged, that worked more, so it was more a BJP's defeat than Congress's victory. And as you would recall, Congress was more surprised by the result than anyone else. There is a parallel between 2004 and this 2019, which may play out. Congress may be surprised once again. And if that happens, so what we are looking at once again is a defeat of BJP rather than a victory for someone else.
But
Why
you
I'm
can,
asking,
okay.
Why I'm asking this question is just trying to figure how issues mediate electoral outcomes. Like Narega similarly is income guarantee. Even the loan waivers. Congress did promise loan waiver in Karnataka, and it had a chief minister with a suitable caste balance. It promised loan waiver in UP. It promised loan waiver in Gujarat. So do these promises on a particular burning issue sway electoral outcomes? Would you spell how do they play out ultimately in the voting choices?
Promises matter if A, the promises are substantial, and B, if they are credible. Again, from my state of Haryana, Devilal won the 87 election on loan waiver. Bansilal won 1996 election on prohibition. Promise looked credible, people win. So promises do win, provided what you are promising something which people want, and you are seen to be credible. On the minimum income guarantee thing and loan waiver, I mean, if Congress were to be seen to be credible in delivering it, yes, it would matter. The question is, would Rahul Gandhi be seen as someone who's credible, whose promise should be believed? Any promise made by Modi government today will not be believed because they have reneged on their promises. But will Congress seem to be that? That's a big question. And we should wait for the election to unfold. So I would not discount any promises, because you really need to generate a sense of hope about future. Promises do contribute to that. But the difficulty with Congress and the rest of Mahagathbandhan is that they do not look credible in the eyes of the people. That is the bigger process.
I wanted to bring a theme which Ravish brought out, the last slide on producers, consumers. Okay, see, we all know that farmers are smashed, right? Prices have crashed and all these things. But this is also a period of very low food price inflation, right? I mean, negative inflation, you know, and I think today RBI cut its the repo rate because of thanks to farmers, right? I mean, the prices fell, and I think RBI's own surveys show that inflation expectations are anchored, you know, and given the fact that the number of consumers, you know, far outnumber the number of producers, you know, even in rural areas, like the number of agricultural laborers, they are ultimately net buyers rather than sellers of grain. So to what extent would this farmer distress be, neutralized or by the fact that you have a very long period, sustained period of low food inflation, you know? I mean, tomato and onions and across. I mean, I have not seen, I have myself not seen a period where you know, all the three major staples, you know, tomato, potatoes and onions, prices so low. So to what extent do you think it will be neutralized? Maybe we are not seeing this, you know, and as a farm reporter, I tend to look more at farmers. Maybe I am ignoring the poor consumer. So.
three quick points. One generally for the benefit of our audience. One of the achievements Modi government has claimed for itself, which is correct, which is that inflation rate has been very low in these 5 years compared to UPA 2. It's substantially low. What we don't sufficiently realize is that two factors have contributed to it. One, of course, is the fall in crude price, which was a bounty, which is no one's contribution in particular. And second is that much of this has come at the cost of the farmers. It's zero or negative inflation in food items, which has contributed to very low inflation. That's a general point. Another point which is more political ethical, which is to say, in no other sector of our economy do we say, because consumers are suffering, bring down your prices. We do not say, for example, manufacturing needs to grow. The real estate needs to grow. We need to build lots of houses. Therefore, steel industry should bring down its prices by 500.
Yeah, steel and cement prices should crash.
Steel and cement prices must be brought down by policy intervention. We never say something of that kind. It's only and only in the case of agriculture that we say, oh my God, there are poor people in this country. They need to get food. Perfect argument. So he's poor. He needs to get cheap food. Therefore, you should lower the price of your commodity. I mean, this is a very absurd argument. This could be made if he was a very rich person and you could say to him, all right, you suffer a few percentage point, what difference does it make? That may have been true maybe 50, 60 years ago. I don't know if that was true even then. But today, he's poor and he's poor. What am I doing? This entire policy, so what the agriculture policy in our country has done is that we have spoken about production. Every minister gets up in the parliament and says, production has gone up this. We don't bother about the producer. And the burden of supplying cheap food to the consumers has been put on the shoulders of the poor farmer. This is not done. You cannot sustain it. And now it's clearly a point where farmers are protesting, resenting. The third is an analytical point.
Yeah, dispassionate. We are talking dispassionately. So far, yes, moral, ethical. I mean, pure numbers, the number of...
Now, the analytical point. People resent, it's sort of, that something hurts me, and I therefore get angry, and I use my vote as a political instrument to punish you for what you've done to me, requires a lot of information, its aggregation, and its articulation. Like the farmers are not organized that way, similarly that rural consumer is also not organized. And one of the funny things is this, if you look at some of these recent surveys, which many of these, and these days, inserting a few questions on farmer is the regular thing for any survey. Sorry. The funny thing is that almost 80% of our population is saying, yes, farmers have been discriminated against, give them loan waiver. 80% support for that. This is almost the kind of support you have for women's reservation in the country. Virtually no one wants to oppose it, or no one wants to be seen to be opposing it. So, to my mind, it is possible that if you give farmers better prices, in 3 or 4 years, or 2 seasons, it would build into food inflation. And if the government does not step in to subsidize and help the consumer, then there may be a backlash. As of now, there is none. As of now, there is a policy space. And for a change, as this is also the window where there is a middle class sympathy for the farmers. This is something which I haven't seen for quite some time. It must have existed, but was not articulated. This if you look at the last 1 year's window, it's as awareness of farmers' distress has grown, thanks to better coverage by the media, by and large, it's been accompanied by a sense that, yes, they deserve something, which is unlike the case with, let's say, the disadvantages of minorities. You get more information about disadvantages of Muslims, and you get opposite reactions. To kya hua? Ye aisa nahi karna chahiye, kuch nahi dena chahiye. In the case of farmers, you don't get that reaction at all. There's almost no serious constituency, apart from those who write in the print press and write articles in these financial newspapers. There's almost no constituent, no political constituency which is opposing some benefits to be transferred to farmers. So this is a wonderful political window for something to be done.
Again, coming to the consumer thing and framing the same thing in a different fashion, if their prices are high, it's a huge political cost. Is there a political benefit of keeping prices low, electorally?
There is a benefit of generally keeping prices low. But I'll tell you one thing. This is something I experienced in my previous birth as a cephalogist, surveyor, and so on. We used to do surveys and ask people, what's the biggest problem of the country? Mehngai. And then we would check it against inflation. Sometimes inflation figure would be high. People would say, Mehngai is the problem. Wonderful, you expect that, that's all right. Then inflation would go down and people would still say Mehngai is the biggest problem. I wondered what's happening. We thought humne question galat pooch liya, we asked it differently. After years of doing it, then we realized that no, when an ordinary person says Mehngai, she's not talking of inflation. She's talking of her purchasing power. I go to market, I cannot purchase what I want to purchase. So it's Mehngai. If it's low inflation by your yardstick, that's your problem. I think we are in a similar situation now. There is very low inflation. But if you speak to poor people, they complain about Mehngai. So therefore, while there are some benefits to be had for keeping inflation low, or at least there are no punishments. Inflation high has a clear punishment, clear political punishment, which is what Manmohan Singh got. But keeping inflation low is not necessarily rewarding unless you also keep Mehngai low. And Mehngai is different from inflation. That's the problem.
We'll open the
Yeah,
floor
I think
for
we'll
questions.
open the floor for, sir.
So I just want to ask you.
Just 1 second, we'll just get the mic.
So I just want to ask you 3 questions. First of all, who is a farmer? Do you include the farm laborers? B, this is very interesting to say that, look, this rural distress, the issue of farmers is an issue-based politics. Is it really an issue-based politics in a country where we are so much divided on caste and religious lines? Are they together? And 3, don't you think there are few farmers in this country who should not be taxed? Thank you.
Fortunately, there is something called the National Farmers Policy in this country that defines who is a farmer. It's 2007 document, and basically it says anyone who has anything to do with agriculture is a farmer. It includes farm labor, it includes sharecropper, it includes landowners, and also those who are not landowners. It includes those who gather forest produce. It includes poultry farmers. It includes animal husbandry. It includes sericulture. Everyone is included. That's the official definition. Politically, that was never the definition. Politically, farmer used to be moochwala, someone who has land. So in the 80s, farmers' movements were movements of the land-owning farmer. One of the big distinctions that has, a big shift that has taken place is that farmer movements have intuitively recognized what he presented in his graphs, which is to say, land-owning farmer is now a minority. Those who do not own land are a majority. They are more than those who own land. So for the first time, All India Kisan Sangharsh Samanvay Samiti and this entire agitation has, so it's to my mind, for the first time you had farmers movement, which from its stage, in its manifesto, in everything that it did, said agricultural labor are important. Earlier, farmer was pitted against agricultural labor. In the classic 80s movement, this was farmer versus agricultural labor, farmer versus urban India. This time, farmer movement is saying no, concerns of agricultural labor are our principal concern. Concerns of sharecropper and tenants are principal concerns. So that's changing. It's a much wider definition that we should work with politically as well. Is it issue-based? Well, caste community is the default option of the Indian voter. When nothing is happening, caste community is happening. But when something is happening, then they are very happy to leave these things behind. We have seen it again and again and again. I'm not saying in this election all the farmers of India are going to vote as farmers. If they did, we would have revolution in this country. But I think the proportion of those who would entertain their farmers' identity, bring back their farmers' identity would increase, and that would work to the detriment of the ruling party this time. The third question was, should some farmers be taxed? Yes, I think there's some panel, government panel had proposed that farmers who earn more than 50 lakhs.
Yeah.
Farmers who earn more than 50 lakhs should be taxed. And my reaction, that's a proper formal reaction, was yes, they should be taxed. Also, they should be invited on the Republic Day and honored. Anyone who can earn 50 lakh rupees from cultivation in this country should be given a presidential medal and taxed.
This side, Dr. Devpal.
Sir, can you speak into the mic?
Mic, sir.
Yeah.
Dr. Devpal, I have 1.1 question to Mr. Yadav. Whatever has been narrated on the platform, it is already in the public domain, and we understood very well. What I did not understand, and Mr. Yadav may help me, in this country, there has been many national governments headed by Nehru or Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Narasimha Rao, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, but it is the first government which has taken oath in May 2014. From that date till today, it has not won any election wherever it was ruling. Why?
It has not
Except-
won.
It is not.
I'm telling you, I will explain.
It has not won any election where it was.
Yes,
Well-
it was ruling in 6 states. I tell you, as NDA in Punjab, as BJP in Gujarat, Goa, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and the third state, Raman Singh. It has not won any state. It has not happened any time in any government. They won Gujarat when they went,
Got it.
माँ हम तेरे बेटे हैं, और आपको पता है माँ से ज्यादा इस हिंदुस्तान में कोई किसी को सम्मान नहीं देता, तो उस माँ ने जिता दिया, अदरवाइज ऑल फ्लैट. वाई? परसेप्शन इज मोदी ने सबसे ज्यादा काम किया है. ही इज नॉट ऑनर्ड. पब्लिक हर बार उसको फेल कर रही है. क्यों ऐसा हो रहा है? जहां पर रूल कर रही है, एक भी इलेक्शन नहीं जीत पाए. दूसरा, आई विल गेट हार्ट अटैक इफ यू से नो.
My God.
Second question is there 1% probability that Mr. Modi will return as Prime Minister? If you say no, I will have heart attack.
I don't mean to cause any heart attacks. And I would just say the following. It is, what you mentioned is correct, sir. From that, I would not, I wish I could say that as someone who is opposed to Mr. Modi's politics deeply, I would have liked to say all those lovely things, but I would not take, I think let us not take away from the fact that after coming to power in 2014, Mr. Modi's popularity actually went up and stayed quite high for the first 3 years. He may have lost a few elections, you are right. Sir, I'm just coming to that, sir.
All elections were
I
very
agree, sir. It is true. No, I do not mean to deny what you are saying, sir. You are correct. I do not mean to deny any fact. What I do not want to do is to conclude from that therefore Mr. Modi was unpopular ever since he was elected the Prime Minister of this country. No, he was not. He has been quite popular. In fact, in the first 2-3 years, in a sense, it's a case of an extended honeymoon. Normally, governments are not popular as long, it lasted even till the UP election. That's 2017 February. So it's actually 3 years when this government managed to be very popular. I cannot think of almost any democratic leader in the world who would survive a disaster like demonetization. Anywhere else in the world, people would have hung such a leader at the next lamppost. He survived and he won elections after that. It's a political paradox that we have to take very seriously. So while I acknowledge what you are saying, and probably one can draw from that a conclusion that Mr. Modi's triumph is a triumph of hope against experience. Wherever there is experience, he loses. Wherever there is hope, he wins. So one could very broadly draw that conclusion. As for 1% probability of his coming back to power, look, I'm not into trying to guess. Fortunately, in my previous birth, I used to do this sort of stuff. And these days, as I say, पहले मैं भविष्य बताने का काम करता था. आजकल भविष्य बनाने का काम करता हूँ. And I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. On the prospects, my simple thing is that that's something I've written a couple of times. वो पुरानी आदत है ना, छोड़ती नहीं है कभी-कभी. I do not see how BJP can get 200 seats. I know 3 opinion polls have come. All 3 of them give BJP more than 200 seats. But I would be astonished if BJP on its own were to get 200 seats. I think we are going to see a replay as far as opinion polls are concerned. We are going to see a replay of 2004. Opinion polls, if you remember in 2004, the average of all pre-election opinion polls was that NDA will get 271 seats. The average of exit polls was that NDA will get 255 seats. They got 187. And it is not because opinion polls were somehow influenced by Mr. Vajpayee. No, there was a technical reason. I don't need to get into that. I think the same technical error is going to be played out once again. And what the opinion polls are trying to guess right now is way above what the BJP would end with. So it's definitely below 200.
My name is Rajat and I'm a political science student. And my question
can you speak into the mic, yeah.
My question is, as my family has been farmer for a very long time, and I'm from Haryana. And these things have made me a bit curious about the farmer distress and all. So if from a very different perspective, if a normal person looks at the farmer distress right now, so what we feel is the quality of education and the other services being provided by the government are not up to that standards that the children of farmers can translate or upgrade themselves to the other sector of the jobs. So my question is there a policy bias towards the urban milieu in the policy making? And my second question is, why has there been a lack of leaders, the grassroots farmer leaders, all through after the post-independent period in India? So there have been few instances, as you spoke, Mr. Tiket and all, but there has not been an umbrella organization, for instance, which has that electoral clout that it has swayed elections. This has been the thing. And the third question is, does this agrarian distress has been translated into this demand for reservation from the dominant caste? And is this going to be the new normal in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. On the question of bias against rural India, not just agriculture, bias against rural India, that I think is a very well-established fact in terms of our policy, in terms of monetary allocations and so on. And technically, economists measure terms of trade between agriculture and the rest of the economy. And we do know now that for several years, terms of trade have been going against agriculture. So these are established facts. It's just that we don't talk about it that often as we used to. In the 70s and 80s, Chaudhry Charan Singh had written a few things. You know, unfortunately, he's remembered only today as some neta of one community. The fact that he had written systematically on these issues, and one of the things he had done was to establish, with a lot of evidence, that our economic policy was systematically biased against the farmers. And I think he had a point in what he said. That has only accentuated further, not gone down. Why do we not have farmers leaders? I think what we should be asking is, why is it that we don't have leaders from farming background who continue to espouse the cause of the farmers? We have lots of leaders from farming background in the country. If you look at who's who of Lok Sabha, you'd probably have
Everybody is a farmer, yeah.
300 MPs who claim that they are farming background. The difficulty is those who have come through the route of farmers' movement and who continue to espouse the cause of the farmer. And that, I think, is linked to a much larger question that in democracy, numerical majority does not automatically become political majority. You know, otherwise women should have much stronger presence in our public life than they do. After all, who can ignore 49% votes? But they do, because women do not vote as women. Poor do not vote as poor. Farmers do not vote as farmers. It's only when you aggregate them on this, this vector that they become a class by themselves. That is when you begin to throw leaders who are from that background. The reservation question, I think, is very interesting. I completely agree with you. I think all these Maratha reservation rallies, and they're drawing 1 lakh people in one rally. Patidar reservation, Jat reservation. To my mind, this is directly related to the two issues that we are talking about, agrarian distress and unemployment. These rural areas are devoid of opportunity, nothing is happening there, farmers are not making income. I'm farmer's son, I've done class 12, and and there's no employment for me either. Someone comes and says, Jat reservation. I get up, I start walking. I actually, you know, in Haryana, we met every single family who lost their son in the Jat reservation agitation from both sides. And you know, the most striking thing that I still remember is that a majority of those boys who got killed demanding Jat reservation were not entitled to any reservation because they had very little education. I mean, even if Jat reservation were to come, they would not have got anything. So this is the problem. So to my mind, when Mr. Arun Jaitley says, you don't have unemployment, if you had unemployment, would you not see people on the street? People are on the street. This Maratha agitation, Patidar agitation, Jat agitation, I mean, all these are expressions of unemployment. What else?
I think the lady, yeah, please.
Hello sir, my name is Garima. So you mentioned that there is a policy space and something can be done. So I wanted to know what exactly are the policies that the government can take, and if, so for instance, the universal basic income or the MSPs or bank farm loan waivers, those are not as efficient, economically viable maybe. So what other things can be done by the governments, and also what disincentivizes the government to opt for those particular schemes or policies?
Yeah. It's a very good question. What disincentivizes government is that farmers don't come to street very often. If they were to take to streets often, governments would have every incentive. Just look at last 4 weeks. You know, so much concern dripping out of every government. They can't speak 2 sentences without mentioning farmers. It's a straightforward, I mean, in democracy, this is straightforward a question of political mobilization. Do political mobilization, show your clout, show your strength, put the fear of God, and next day you begin to see so much attention, care. I mean, do you for a moment suspect that these farmers are these leaders of our country are thinking of anything except farmers in the last 4 weeks? And that is straightforward. So that's a straightforward question. The other question is, I think, very serious. And I'm very happy that after a very long time in this country, some space has come up where we can even begin to ask questions of this kind. You know, earlier, the space available in public domain to discuss farmers' problems was so small that you could insert only one item. So tell me, what do farmers need? Tell me, acha, ye, theek hai, we go to next question. By the time you can say only one sentence, so that one sentence used to be farm loan waiver or prices or something of that sort. Fortunately, now we have space to maybe say 6 or 7 sentences. And those 6 or 7 sentences would be the following. Farmers, above all, need remunerative prices. Income is their first concern. Loan waiver is a concern, it's a real concern, but it's way down in their priority. First and above all, income. And the best instrument for that income would be prices, better prices. How do farmers get better prices? 4 or 5 things that the governments can do. 1, better procurement. The government purchases. At the moment, they virtually purchase 2 things. They announce minimum support price for 24 commodities, but that's largely for effect and theatrics. The government actually purchases only 2 things, wheat and paddy. And they purchase these because they have to use it for their ration shops. So the first thing that can be done is better procurement at better prices. The minimum support price that the government declares is declared in a way that is faulty. It should be slightly higher. I think it should be done with C2 plus 50%, but these are technicalities. It should be slightly higher. But more importantly, the government should actually purchase. Farmers should receive that price, which they don't. How can they do so? The government can increase the procurement. They obviously cannot procure all the 24 commodities. It would be silly to expect the government to purchase all the sarson in this country, all the cotton in this country. That's not the government's job. But they can definitely procure a little more of coarse grains, what I call nutri-cereals these days. That needs to be promoted. The governments can definitely procure more of dal. We need it, poor people need it. And some way of procuring milk. You know, it's a strange situation where our, millions and millions of children need more milk, and we say we have oversupply of milk in this country. So the government can step in. That's one small partial solution. Number 2, the government can activate its price support, the market intervention schemes, which is to say, the government would say, I'm not into purchasing cotton, but I'm here in the market to ensure that if the prices fall below a certain level, I would strategically intervene in the market, buy a small quantity so that the prices go up, and after that I step back again. So I'm not purchasing in order to purchase and in order to distribute, but for market intervention. Number 3, the least the government can do is to make its import and export policy such that farmers can benefit from international market. Right now, whenever there is a little opportunity that farmers can get something from international market, the government comes and imposes restrictions. You cannot sell. For onion, for heaven's sake, I can't understand. Onion is not the principal sort of source of protein or vitamins or iron in this country. I mean, if onion prices are 100 rupees, Indians are not going to starve, our nutrition levels are not going to drop, and allow farmers to sell something. So import-export policy needs to be changed. Along with that, you would need to give direct cash support once in a while. For specific categories, some direct income support will also have to be given. So we have to look at a package which has 4 or 5 components. And sorry, I forgot to mention one more thing, which is effective disaster compensation. Farming is so risky proposition today, is getting riskier and is bound to get more riskier because of climate change and frequency of extreme weather events. There has to be a way to make farming risk-proof Indian farming. If you do these 5 or 6 things, then you're doing a new deal for Indian farming. You're putting Indian farmer on a better footing. I personally believe that along with all this, you would also need to do a one-time loan waiver. Once to give them a clean slate and say, all right, now start. But one can debate on this. But the principal solution is the things that I have mentioned. And under the current dispensation, one more thing that should have been said, which is, please stop harming the farmers. If you can't benefit them, that's all right. Please stop harming. I mean, the demonetization, as Harish's work has repeatedly shown, it has destroyed Indian mandis all over the country. The effects of demonetization are visible even today. Harish has been arguing, please lift restrictions on cash trading in mandis. And on the cattle, I mean, cattle is the fallback for the farmer. That's a fallback income and that's a fallback capital. And currently, the prices of cattle have dropped. Milk prices have dropped. These are two separate things. But I mean, the least you can do is to allow cattle trade to function normally. These are things which would actually go a long way in benefiting the Indian farmer.
Hello, sir. My name is Sujit. I'm a political science student. I have 2
I've never understood why people study political science, but go on.
UPSC preparation.
For UPSC, yeah, now I understand.
I have 2 political questions, sir. You mentioned that middle class have sympathy for the farmers. But do you believe that this sympathy will turn into vote in favor of the farmers? Because when we see middle class is happy when they say the petrol prices is low or some cinema tickets are low.
Onion prices are low.
Onion prices are low. And second question is, do you think that this election is going to be like Janata Party election versus Indira Gandhi election?
Interesting.
Mahagathbandhan or against Modi? And if that is going the case, then do you think Mr. Modi will again come back if in condition loses the election in 1 year?
So bhavishyavani hai.
I really wish it were to be like 1977. In my eyes, what is at stake is something similar to 1977. My whole interest in democracy, political science, and elections began in the evening of 1977. I was small, I was 14-year-old, and 77 elections had taken place, and I was there in the crowd watching the election results. And the All India Radio was saying Congress leading in Andhra Pradesh, And then at 7:30 came Mark Tilley's report on BBC. Sanjay Gandhi losing his seat, Indira Gandhi trailing in her seat. And I saw the crowd erupt. That for me was democracy. That day made me a political scientist. Otherwise, I never know why one should be a political
So
scientist.
you became a political scientist at 14, huh? Not bad.
That got me interest in politics. Then I started, following, in India today, those days, Prannoy used to write those things. Lovely initial pieces of psephology. Then I started following all that. I can't forget that evening. So to my mind, what is at stake today is no less than what was at stake in 1977. 1977 was about ensuring that India remains democracy. Today is about India remaining India. So our very foundations of our republic are at stake. But I do not expect it to play out like this, because I do not think democracy or secularism will be the critical questions of this election. if Mr. Modi loses, which I think he will, it will be on the economy issue rather than secularism and democracy. The first question was about middle class. I think there's a lot of demonization of middle class, which I don't subscribe to. You see, do remember that every great movement in this country in the 20th century succeeded because significant sections of middle class participated in it. Our freedom struggle famously had the middle class in it. Look at the JP movement, look at Gujarat movement, look at the Naxalite movement. I mean, any major movement, Narmada Bachao, environmental struggles, or the Anna Hazare movement. I mean, middle classes participation is almost a precondition to success and visibility of a movement. And middle classes, like all of us, like farmer, like labor, we are all slightly self-centered. But I think that's largely because we are so ignorant. And in the last 1 year, I have seen with my eyes, as people become slightly more aware of what the condition of Indian farmers is, I have seen a lot of sympathy and support. We started a program 3 years ago. There was drought in the country, you were traveling, and we said, you know, why should these university students not come in that? We initiated an internship program called Drought Duty. We said, here's a drought in the country, we'll offer you internship, we'll not give you 1 paisa, you'll have to spend everything from your pocket, we'll take you to a village, spend some time there, help there. We had more applications than we could handle. And this has run for 3 years now. Every year we get more applications than we can handle. Those who went to the villages came back converted. I can tell you, one of them went to this place in Madhya Pradesh, Shivpuri district. The condition was so bad that he had to be hospitalized. Went to hospital, got a drip, came back and said, I'm a transformed person forever. So many of our Drought Duty volunteers have come back to say, this has transformed me. So it's not that middle class is made of a material which is of a different kind than the rest of human beings. It's just that our circle of sensibility and sensitivity has been so small. If you open it, and that's where media plays a very critical role, and that's my eternal grudge against the Indian media. This is of the middle class, for the middle class, by the middle class. And that's why my respect for people like Harish, you know, where you actually get to see what's happening in the rest of the country. As and when it happens, people do open out. And in fact, it's been a very, very positive thing when I see in these opinion polls. Middle class is not saying don't give anything to these farmers. No, they're not saying that. And that's where hope is.
I think, okay.
Harish sir, I don't know why we didn't talk much about unemployment.
Okay.
And I want to know about the solutions to unemployment. And second question, but when we talk about unemployment, solution to unemployment, we go back to the solutions to rural entrepreneurship, rural India. I don't know we should use the word black or not, but in youngsters they have that fascination of urban development, urbanized development. So how to deal with it, the idea of urbanized development?
I think the problem is that we link the problem of employment to the problem of secure jobs. Secure job is a very small fraction of the pool of employment. 2 or 3 things I'll quickly say. You're right, we did not discuss this sufficiently. One is, by now there is mounting evidence, almost undeniable, except by 5 or 6 people in this country, that we are passing through one of the worst phases of unemployment. Economists used to say India does not suffer from unemployment for a strange reason. We have disguised unemployment. We do not have open unemployment. That used to be a classic thing about Indian economy. And the unemployment rates, open unemployment, someone who says, I am unemployed, I am doing nothing, used to be about 1 to 2%. So, economists used to be puzzled, in this poor country, why is it that only 1 or 2% people are saying unemployed? For the first time, that figure has now shot to 6.1%. It is not all unemployed. These are 6.1% who are saying, I am unemployed. I have nothing, no work to do. I have zero economic activity to which I can contribute. Besides that, you have large number who may be disguised unemployed, who have employment which doesn't pay them what they should, etc. We are passing through a very critical phase. And to my mind, this is, if someone could find a way to aggregate it, the difficulty is that this is a population which is most difficult to aggregate. Farmers are difficult to aggregate, but they are not as difficult to aggregate as the youth is, because there is no one natural habitat where you find them. In our movements, we found something strange. The one place where you find maximum number of unemployed is not the university. University students have very limited thing. It's the coaching centers. Coaching centers all over the country. They are mushrooming like anything. And therefore, unemployment is the biggest industry in the country right now. This coaching centers. So gathering them, that's probably where some mobilization can take place. But you're also right to say that unfortunately, all our attention about solutions to the problem of employment is also about secure jobs. So obviously, things that get more attention is the fact that government has 2.4 million jobs, which it is not filling. That gets attention. You get more attention to the fact that all these government bhartis are full of corruption, full of all kinds of things. But in the last instance, that is not where the solution is. This is a tiny fraction of our pool of employment or unemployment. The real solution has to be in generating economic opportunities which would lead to more jobs being created. So in that sense, that pakora thing has become a bit of a joke. But if you take that seriously, it's not a bad argument. That if you actually encourage if you actually give economy a stimulus, that lots of self-employment can be generated, that would be a good idea. But has that happened? That has not happened. And I think increasingly we should look at rural India as an opportunity space, a place where lots of employment can be generated. Unfortunately, the moment we think of employment, we think of IT, we think of government jobs. We do not, for example, think of animal husbandry as a source of employment. I'm quite sure that animal husbandry in India can offer more employment than all IT sectors in India put together. But somehow that doesn't exist on our mental map. So we need to rethink our economic priorities. And to my mind, a certain big plan of regeneration of rural India. Because rural India is not, never was only agriculture. The idea that rural economy is only agriculture, that's a very bad idea. And that is actually a problem. Unless rural India becomes a hub of manufacturing, of services, we do not, how would this country generate employment? So a lot of employment strategies need to shift to rural India.
I'm sorry, there is time only for 2 questions, one ma'am and one for the person there who has been waiting for a long time. This person there, yeah, the person who is just raised, yeah.
Me or no?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. My name is Mohini Malik, and I'm not a student of political science, but of philosophy. And I hope that will get reflected in my question. I think you've been a little less than charitable to the Mahagathbandhan. And what you did was criticize the individual members. Now, someone has, stolen money, someone has, well, we don't have to either itemize the names or what they've done. it seems to me that you cannot be a successful politician without having done one or two of these things in any case. But that is really not the point. The point is that something has brought these people together, and they're genuinely together. Unless, you know, you believe what the newspapers say, that, oh, X is in it because he wants to be prime minister, and Y is in it because she wants to be prime minister. That cynical attitude, I think, is something that we have to get beyond. And I'm sure that you, at least, are not falling for this kind of an understanding of what has brought a lot of people together. What has it? And the answer to that is that they are representing a very largely felt, I think almost now universally felt. It's not a question, you know, of just economics. Surely, Mr. Yadav, you know that the problems of this country are not simply of those of economics. You talked just now of your realization of democracy when you were 14. Well, some of us are 40 and some of us are 80. And we have all formed ideas of what democracy should be, of what India should be, of what India is, essentially. And so, given our limitations, and as I said, there is no one, you know, doodh ka dhula, there's nobody. So don't say that, well, I don't know about X, should I walk towards her or walk away and so on. I mean, I was a little disturbed by your attitude, your approach to this coming together of people. These are people who are disturbed, as we are disturbed. Why are we here today? We are not here only to listen about farmers. Of course, we need that data. I'm sorry, I don't want to make a speech, but I would like to...
Yeah, you can have this question and then, yeah, I'm sorry, this is the last. No, that's okay. Yeah, the last question, and I'm sorry.
My name is Salman Salim, and I am a student of political science.
UPSC.
Sir, I have watched your interviews, and you have been a hard critic of this government. And I must say it takes a lot of courage in a country where Section 124A continues to be treated as Prince of Indian Penal Code. So first of all, appreciation for that. And sir, my question is, you just mentioned Raitu Bandhu scheme of Telangana government, and you have shown an optimistic attitude towards the scheme. Then sir, why a pessimistic attitude towards the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana since the budget has been announced, despite the fact that both the schemes have similar nature? Thank you so much.
Okay, I think now we'll
I'll first answer his question and end with yours, because that's very important.
I think,
That in a sense sums up what many of the things we've been talking about. On the Telangana Raitu Bandhu scheme, I simply said it has worked to the advantage of TRS because there was a government which was seen to be doing something. Remember, they started it about, I think, a year and a half. They started before the elections, and 2 installments were transferred by them. So it was seen to be slightly more serious a business. Some advantages reached them. But I also, I think, remember having said that as a scheme, it suffers from many limitations. And one of the biggest limitations is this, that money is transferred only to landowners. And increasingly, as we saw, most of the people who are doing cultivation are not landowners. So a scheme like Raitu Bandhu or the PM Kisan, these schemes by definition exclude sharecroppers and tenant farmers, not to speak of landless labor. So that's a structural limitation. It clicked in Telangana because at least someone was seen to be doing something. Chalo, something is better than nothing. Why do I not celebrate the PM Kisan scheme in a similar way? For the following reasons. One, I think it is cynical. If this government had announced this scheme in the budget of last year, I would have responded to it as a serious scheme. Right now, in the 6th budget of 5-year, if you announce something like this, it's bound to appear just a cynical ploy. And the reason for that, I honestly think they are not even serious about the scheme. The only thing this government is serious about is sending the first installment. Just try and think, you know, most budget schemes are announced from 1st of March. This one is announced from December. Ever seen a scheme which is announced in the budget? That very evening, letters are issued to chief secretaries. Within 48 hours, detailed guidelines are out. My God, this government cares so much for farmers. I've never seen such a government in the past. Within 48 hours, scheme guidelines are out. It is all about somehow transferring some money to the account of these farmers. Splitting this into 3 installments is a strange decision. Most agriculture things are split in 2 installments because there are 2 seasons. So there's every reason to believe that it is cynical, number one. Number two, the amount is a joke. I'm not saying 500 rupees a month is a joke in rural India. There are many parts of the country where 500 rupees a month makes a difference. But compared, you know, this amount has to be relative to something, you know. If I make an online purchase and I get 12 rupees back in my account, I don't mind it, you know. It may not mean nothing, but I don't mind that money. But if someone said, oh, you suffer from poverty, you suffer from very serious difficulties, you are a politician, you don't know how to consult, वो 2-4 चीज़ जो करनी पड़ती हैं तुम्हें नहीं आती, you are in a distress, let me give you 12 rupees. Then I would mind it. So I think what's happening to farmers is this. This is being offered as a compensation for low income and for cost of agriculture being high. Then you have to compare it to that. This scheme would apply to a farmer with 5 acres of land. So it is 1,200 rupees per acre. For one crop, it's 600 rupees. Just try and see what can you get in 600 rupees. So relative to what it proposes to do, this is a joke. And 3, to my mind, the government has not even thought through how it is to be implemented because a database like this does not exist. So it's really a last-minute gamble. It's a last-minute bribe. Yeah. That's why I'm so, that's why my anger vis-a-vis this scheme. There is one benefit though, I should underline. In the cynical ploy and a very short-term game that the government has played, something of long-term significance has happened accidentally, which is agriculture as a share of our union budget has jumped from 2.2% to 5.5%. And I think no government in future would have the courage to scale it back now. So thank you very much. I'm happy with this. Your question, it's correct to say that I was unfair. I was very sharp on them. It is clear that we should not read politicians simply by their motives. Criticizing politicians merely by their motives is like criticizing a shopkeeper for wanting to make profit. Well, they are there for that. That's what most political action is about. The reason I criticize them sharply is precisely for things that you believe in. For me, this government must go because at stake is the very idea of India. Because at stake are the fundamental values of my republic. And I do not see any of them being concerned about that. I do not see any policy package. You know, how do you judge a political party or a group? I have no means of getting inside their heart. I would judge them by their agenda. I judge them by their policies. I judge them by what they do. So, if Mr. Kamal Nath, within a month of taking over as Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister, arrests, if the same kind of cow vigilante stuff begins to take place in Madhya Pradesh, then I wonder what's happening on, I mean, am I pecking two kinds, sort of my hopes on secularism, are they justified, are they not? My own assessment, it could be correct, it could be wrong, is that Mahagathbandhan is actually not a coherent political platform at all. Its definition keeps shifting. As you know, we would really get to see whether Mahagathbandhan is a Mahagathbandhan in Uttar Pradesh. We'll get to see that in Bengal. We'll get to see that in many states. So it's not a clear defined entity, and I do not see that sense of purpose. Oh my God, my country is at stake, let me sink all the differences. No, I don't see that happening. What I see happening is, oh my God, Modi is a big danger. If Modi comes back, hamari to halat kharab ho jayegi. So it's the fear of Mr. Modi which has brought them together. I would believe in Mahagathbandhan a little more than I do now if I were to see a set of clear policies. If I were to see what is it that they promise on democracy, and if they promise that, it would constrain their own actions as well. If Mahagathbandhan says, we shall not do the following things to retain democratic liberties, it would constrain Mamata Banerjee in doing things. I mean, try and organize a small meeting in a small town of West Bengal, which I tried doing 10 days ago. It is not the local administration that decides. It is the TMC cadre there that decides whether opposition can hold a meeting or not. How can I forget these things? So, A, do they offer any systematic charter on democratic liberties? Second, do we get some commitment on minority rights? Do we, of course, I cannot imagine that a government that would come to power by getting lots of votes of the Muslims would ever be so anti-Muslim like this government has been. That's obviously the case. But that's not a matter of conviction or principles. That's a matter of political compulsion. That itself would be something nice. But I would also want to see what is the positive agenda of Mahagathbandhan in terms of policies. Policies on agriculture, policies to do with employment, policies to do with the overall revival of economy, policies to do with basic services being given to people. We've come up with an agenda, incidentally. I didn't use this occasion, and finally your question gives me a pretext. Yesterday, some of us came out with an agenda. It's called Reclaiming the Republic. It's a document written by some 20, 30 people put together who are disturbed exactly by the things that disturb you about this regime, and who have come up with a positive agenda to say, if we are serious about reclaiming the Republic, this is what we should do in education, this is what we should do in agriculture, on health, on judiciary, on media, and so on and so forth. So if I see Mahagathbandhan being committed to something like this agenda, my respect for Mahagathbandhan will go up. Otherwise, yes, Mahagathbandhan, I mean, BJP's defeat any which way would be a relief for this country, but I would not pin too many hopes because of the question that my friend had asked. I had seen 1977, and after that I saw 1979 and 1980. I do look at May 2019, but I also worry about 2021. And that's something which all of us must worry about.
Thanks a lot, Yogendra. It has been a pleasure to have you here.